I would like to also explain my opinion of what happened in the Game of Thrones behind the scenes. Now, this is based on my assessment of what I know about people, not individual people of the Game of Thrones as far as the producers and the executives, but people in general, and reading between the lines of the arc of how things went from season 1 through season 8. I think that initially, let me say this about Martin, the author. I believe that Martin is a fella who does not like controversy. He doesn't get into arguments. He's a very peaceable fella, and he's an introvert, I believe, in his nature, and that's why he is able to get deeply into these stories and weave these historical events into this fantasy narrative of A Song of Ice and Fire. So take that in mind and set that aside. The producers of the show, really, when it comes down to it, I don't think they know anything about writing. They know about producing television shows that maybe are popular and putting elements in that they know that the audience will find popular, as long as there is a low common denominator in the audience. So in other words, they're shooting for a low score as far as intelligence level of the audience. They happen to get lucky in getting in on this Game of Thrones production. So there's your second party. You got Martin, and then you got David and David, the producers. And then you've got your third party here is the executives of HBO, and I'll say about them. The executives of HBO, whoever they are, we know that they're very skittish, very risk-averse individuals. The slightest whiff that ratings might fall off on a television show, and they'll pull the funding. We saw that in Rome. We also saw that in Deadwood, where they gave them a green light, and then at the last minute they took it away, and that's why Deadwood was left hanging off a cliff. At least in Rome's case, they allowed them to taper it off in their second season. Those two shows could have gone on a lot further, especially Rome. But because the skittishness, the risk averseness of the executives of HBO, they run from a project if there's the slightest bit of signs that the audience might fall off. In the Game of Thrones, there was no sign of that, and so the executives were more than willing to give it the green light that it justly deserved, and as much funding as they could possibly put forth on it. I think what happened, now if you take those three parts, and I think if you look at it, what happened is that as the Game of Thrones was being produced through season 1 through season 5, they had material to work off of from Martin. In the very beginning, Martin promised them that they would have books 6 and 7. But along the way, I think that Martin probably, and I've kind of heard this through interviews, that he gently suggested that they not leave out some of the plot twists or nuances or the myth or some of the characters that he had slowly massaging into the first 5 books. And I think what happened is the producers said, "Hey, we know television. You know books. Thank you for your material, and we're going to make it a success on television. You just sit back and watch." I think that at some point, Martin felt like he'd been sidelined to some extent, and he was being ignored. Martin is, in my opinion, not just an introvert, but he's also got probably a passive-aggressive personality because he's non-confrontational. But everybody has to have some kind of way to get that aggression out. I think my money would be on the fact that Martin is passive aggressive. I think that when his advice was ignored by the producers as he was giving them the material and helping them develop it for the television show and saying, okay, now let's not leave this out because this is going to be significant. Well, no, we know, Martin. You just listen. We're the producers. You're the writers. Thank you for writing the books. You need to concentrate on getting us that book number 6 and 7 and do your job. I think what happened is that he felt sidelined and his passive aggressiveness somewhat came out, and he decided, well, you boys think you're so big for your britches. You think you're so good. Let's see how you run when you run out of material. Now, I don't think he ever said this to him, but I think that maybe in his home, alone, in a room, sitting in the bathroom, thought, I'm going to show these fellas. I'm going to show these 2 producers that think that they're hot shots. Let's see how well they do when they run out of material. I guarantee you this is probably what happened. And he ran, and he didn't produce book number 6 or number 7. Promised it, kept talking about it, joked about it. I think he will produce 6 and 7 now that the whole television show has literally gone off the rails and into a cavern or the toilet. I hope that explains, and I'm going to continue to explain in the next video on what I believe went on behind the scenes in the Game of Thrones and the personalities and egos that got involved. As the Greeks said, beware of hubris, and I believe that we're all guilty of committing hubris. It's a human factor that's existed. The Greeks had identified. It's written about in the classics. I encourage you to study more about that. Join me in the next video, and I'll explain more of what I think happened in the Game of Thrones behind the scenes between the executive board and the writer and the 2 producers. Wait a minute. Hold on. Hello? Yes. Oh, Mr. President. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I've got to take this. So join me in the next one. And no, I'm not busy at all. I'm just doing a recording. No. You're not interrupting anything. Listen, hey, I got your card. I'm sorry I couldn't join you in England. I fell ill. Yes, I got your card. I appreciate that very much. How was the Queen anyway? Did she enjoy your company? I understand that she did. Well, that's good. Yeah, and I hope you told her I would have come, but I didn't want to get her sick. I certainly didn't want to get anybody sick. I just didn't feel well at all. I'm feeling much better now. Thank you, Mr. President. My thoughts. Yes, I'll give you my thoughts on what happened. I think that you're on the right track, but I think that there's a few adjustments that can be made with your staff. Yes. I agree.